Timber framing and post and beam construction are methods of building with heavy timbers rather than dimensional lumber such as 2x4s. Traditional timber framing is the method of creating structures using heavy squared-off and carefully fitted and joined timbers with joints secured by large wooden pegs. It is commonplace in wooden buildings from the 19th century and earlier. The method comes from making things out of logs and tree trunks without modern high-tech saws to cut lumber from the starting material stock, using axes, adzes, and draw knives, hand-powered auger drill bits, and laborious woodworking. Artisans or farmers could gradually assemble a building capable of bearing heavy weight without excessive use of interior space given over to vertical support posts. Since this building method has been used for thousands of years in many parts of the world, many styles of historic framing have developed. These styles are often categorized by the type of foundation, walls, how and where the beams intersect, the use of curved timbers, and the roof framing details. Three basic types of timber frames in English-speaking countries are the box frame, Kruk frame, and Untitled frame. Box frame, a simple timber frame made of straight vertical and horizontal pieces with a common rafter roof without purlins. The term box frame is not well defined and has been used for any kind of framing other than Kruk framing. The distinction presented here is the roof load is carried by the exterior walls. Purlins are also in a simple timber frame. Kruk frame. A kruk is a pair of crooked or curved timbers which form a bent-across frame, the individual timbers each called the blade. More than 4,000 kruk frame buildings have been recorded in the UK. Several types of kruk frames are used. More information follows in English style below and at the main article. Kruk. True kruk or full kruk. Blades, straight or curve, extend from ground or foundation to the ridge acting as the principal rafters. A full kruk does not need a tie beam. Base kruk tops of the blades are truncated by the first transverse member such as by a tie beam. Raised kruk blades land on masonry wall and extend to the ridge. Middle kruk blades land on masonry wall and are truncated by collar. Upper kruk blades land on a tie beam, very similar to knee rafters. Jointed kruk blades are made from pieces joined near eaves in a number of ways. See also, hammer beam roof. End kruk is not a style, but on the gable end of a building. Untitled frame. Untitled frames have one or more rows of interior posts. These interior posts typically carry more structural load than the posts in the exterior walls. This is the same concept of the aisle in church buildings, sometimes called the hall church, where the center aisle is technically called a nave. However, a nave is often called an aisle, and three-aisled barns are common in the US, the Netherlands, and Germany. Aisled buildings are wider than the simpler box-framed or kruk-framed buildings, and typically have purlins supporting the rafters. In northern Germany, this construction is known as variations of a standard house. Half-timbering. Half-timbering refers to a structure with the frame of load-bearing timber, creating spaces between the timbers called panels, which are then filled in with some kind of non-structural material known as infill. The frame is often left exposed on the exterior of the building. Infill materials. The earliest known type of infill, called opus craticum by the Romans, was a wattle and daub type construction. Opus craticum is now confusingly applied to a Roman stone mortar infill. Also, similar methods to wattle and daub were also used and known by various names, such as clamstaff and daub, cat and clay, or tortoise, to name only three. Wattle and daub was the most common infill in ancient times. The sticks were not always technically wattle work, but also individual sticks installed vertically, horizontally, or at an angle into holes or grooves in the framing. The coating of daub has many recipes, but generally was a mixture of clay and chalk with a binder such as grass or straw and water or urine. When the manufacturing of bricks increased, brick infill replaced the less durable infills and became more common. Stone laid in mortar as an infill was used in areas where stone rubble and mortar were available. Other infills include mucilage, fired brick, unfired brick such as adobe or mud brick, stones sometimes called piratage, planks as in the German Standardbohlenbau, timbers as in Standardblockbau, or rarely cob without any wooden support. The wall surfaces on the interior were often kailed with wainscoting and plastered for warmth and appearance. Brick infill, sometimes called nogging, became the standard infill after the manufacturing of bricks made them more available and less expensive. Half-timbered walls may be covered by siding materials including plaster, weatherboarding, tiles, or slate shingles. The infill may be covered by other materials including weatherboarding or tiles, or left exposed. When left exposed, both the framing and infill were sometimes done in a decorative manner. Germany is famous for its decorative half-timbering, and the figures sometimes have names and meanings. The decorative manner of half-timbering is promoted in Germany by the German Timber Frame Road. Several planned routes people can drive to see notable examples of patchwork buildings. Gallery of infill types. Gallery of some named figures and decorations. The collection of elements in half-timbering are sometimes given specific names. History of the term. The term half-timbering is not as old as the German name patchwork or the French name colombage, but it is the standard English name for this style. One of the first people to publish the term half-timbered was Mary Martha Sherwood, who employed it in her book The Lady of the Manor, published in several volumes from 1823 to 1829. She uses the term picturesquely. Passing through a gate in a quickset hedge, we arrived at the porch of an old half-timbered cottage, where an aged man and woman received us. By 1842, half-timbered had found its way into the Encyclopedia of Architecture by Joseph Gwilt. This juxtaposition of exposed timbered beams and infilled spaces created the distinctive half-timbered, or occasionally termed Tudor, style, or black and white. Oldest examples. The most ancient known half-timbered building is called the House of Opus Craticum. It was buried by the eruption of Mount Vesuvius in 79 AD in Herculaneum, Italy. Opus Craticum was mentioned by Vitruvius in his books on architecture as a timber frame with wattlework infill. However, the same term is used to describe timber frames with an infill of stone rubble laid in mortar. The Romans called opus incitum. Alternate meanings. A less common meaning of the term half-timbered is found in the 4th edition of John Henry Parker's Classic Dictionary of Architecture, which distinguishes full-timbered houses from half-timbered, with half-timber houses having a ground floor in stone or logs, such as the Cludge House, which was a log cabin with a timber-framed second floor. Structure. Traditional timber framing is the method of creating framed structures of heavy timber jointed together with various joints, commonly and originally with lap jointing, and then later pegged mortise and tenon joints. Diagonal bracing is used to prevent racking or movement of structural vertical beams or posts. Originally, German master carpenters would peg the joints with allowance of about an inch, enough room for the wood to move as it seasoned, then cut the pegs, and drive the beam home fully into its socket. To cope with variable sizes and shapes of hewn and sawn timbers, two main carpentry methods were employed: scribe carpentry and square rule carpentry. Scribing or coping was used throughout Europe, especially from the 12th century to the 19th century, and subsequently imported to North America, where it was common into the early 19th century. In a scribe frame, timber sockets are fashioned or tailor-made to fit their corresponding timbers. Thus, each timber piece must be numbered. Square rule carpentry was developed in New England in the 18th century. It used housed joints in main timbers to allow for interchangeable braces and girts. Today, standardized timber sizing means that timber framing can be incorporated into mass production methods as per the joinery industry, especially where timber is cut by precision computer numerical control machinery. Jetties. A jetty is an upper floor which sometimes historically used a structural horizontal beam supported on cantilevers, called a bressumer or jetty bressumer, to bear the weight of the new wall projecting outward from the preceding floor story. In the city of York in the United Kingdom, the famous street known as the Shambles exemplifies this, where jettied houses seem to almost touch above the street. Timbers. Historically, the timbers would have been hewn square using a felling axe and then surface finished with a broad axe. If required, smaller timbers were rip-sawn from the hewn balks using pit saws or frame saws. Today, timbers are more commonly band-sawn, and the timbers may sometimes be machine-planed on all four sides. The vertical timbers include posts, wall studs, for example, close studding. The horizontal timbers include sill beams, noggin pieces, wall plates. When jettying, horizontal elements can include the jetty bressumer, where the main sill on which the projecting wall above rests stretches across the whole width of the jetty wall. The bressumer is itself cantilevered forward, beyond the wall below it. The dragon beam, which runs diagonally from one corner to another, and supports the corner posts above and supported by the corner posts below. The jetty beams are joists conform T-floor dimensions above, but are at right angles to the jetty plates that conform to the shorter dimensions of roof of the floor below. Jetty beams are mortised at 45 degrees into the sides of the dragon beams. They are the main constituents of the cantilever system and determine how far the jetty projects. The jetty plates are designed to carry the jetty beams. The jetty plates themselves are supported by the corner posts of the recessed floor below. The sloping timbers include trusses, braces, herringbone bracing, post construction and frame construction. There were two different systems of the position of posts and studs. In the older manner, called post construction, the vertical elements continue from the groundwork to the roof. This post construction in German is called Geschossbauweise or Standbauweise. It is somewhat similar to balloon framing method common in North America until the middle of the 20th century. In the advanced manner, called frame construction, each story is constructed like a case, and the whole building is constructed like a pile of such cases. This frame construction in German is called Rahmenbauweise or Stockworksbauweise. Ridge post framing is a structurally simple and ancient post and lintel framing where the posts extend all the way to the ridge beams. Germans call this first saw a Hochstud. Modern features in the United States and Canada. Timber frame construction has been revived since the 1970s, and is now experiencing a thriving renaissance of the ancient skills. This is largely due to such practitioners as Steve Chappell, Jack Sobin, and Ted Benson, who studied old plans and techniques and revived a long-neglected technique, once a handcrafted skill passed down. Timber frame construction has now been modernized with the help of modern industrial tools such as the CNC machines. These machines and mass production techniques have assisted growth and made for more affordable frames and shorter lead times for projects. Timber-framed structures differ from conventional wood-framed buildings in several ways. Timber framing uses fewer, larger wooden members, commonly timbers in the range of 15 to 30 centimeters, while common wood framing uses many more timbers with dimensions usually in the 5 to 25 cm range. The methods of fastening the frame members also differ. In conventional framing, the members are joined using nails nails or other mechanical fasteners, whereas timber framing uses the traditional mortise and tenon or more complex joints that are usually fastened using only wooden pegs. Modern complex structures and timber trusses often incorporate steel joinery such as gusset plates, for both structural and architectural purposes. Recently, it has become common practice to enclose the timber structure entirely in manufactured panels such as structural insulated panels. Although the timbers can only be seen from inside the building when so enclosed, construction is less complex and insulation is greater than in traditional timber building. SIPs are an insulating foam core sandwiched between two structural facings, typically oriented strand board, according to the Structural Insulated Panel Association. SIPs reduce dependency on bracing and auxiliary members, because the panels span considerable distances and add rigidity to the basic timber frame. An alternate construction method is with concrete flooring with extensive use of glass. This allows of very solid construction, combined with open architecture. Some firms have specialized in industrial prefabrication of such residential and light commercial structures such as HUF houses, low-energy houses, or, dependent on location, zero-energy buildings. Straw bale construction is another alternative where straw bales are stacked for non-load-bearing infill with various finishes applied to the interior and exterior such as stucco and plaster. This appeals to the traditionalist and the environmentalist as this is using found materials to build. Mud bricks, also called adobe, are sometimes used to fill in timber frame structures. They can be made on site and offer exceptional fire resistance. Such buildings must be designed to accommodate the poor thermal insulating properties of mud brick, however, and usually have deep eaves or a veranda on four sides for weather protection.